What's up, y'all? It's Quinn Steven. I'm back with another YouTube video, and we're here to go ahead and break down the second round of the NBA playoffs, the semifinals. And we're diving right into it because yesterday we ended round one of the playoffs, and they're going right into round two. They're not wasting any time. We got two games on tap tonight: the Sixers and the Knicks, and then the Timberwolves and the Spurs. So, NBA not wasting any time. Getting right to it, and we'll go ahead and recap the first round. The first round of the NBA playoffs, to put it lightly, was absolute madness. Of course, you had three teams really pull off upsets in the first round, that being the Lakers over the Rockets, the Sixers over the Celtics, and then the Timberwolves over the Nuggets. Two of those teams that lost, the Nuggets and the Celtics, were a lot of teams picked to, in the Nuggets case, either make the conference finals or the finals, and then the Celtics were most people's pick to make the NBA finals, including mine. And so hopefully if you guys made brackets, you didn't put any money on it, all right? But you had that going on. You had two teams come back from 3-1 leads. Of course, Detroit over Orlando. Of course, Detroit was in 1 seed at that. And then, of course, the Sixers and the Celtics. So a wild first round. And if that's any indication, the second round could be just as wild, but we'll have to see. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and break down the second round of the playoffs, each series, starting in the Eastern Conference with the 4-1 matchup, that being the 4-seed Cleveland Cavaliers and the 1 seed, the Detroit Pistons. What are going to be the keys to this matchup? You know, Detroit, as we saw in that last series, really struggled with Orlando in their ability to score and to have specifically players that could score in isolation. With Paolo Banchero, Desmond Bane, and Franz Wagner, that is until Franz Wagner suffered a leg injury and missed the last 3 games. So the Pistons got a bit of a break there with that. Don't know how fortunate they'll be in this one because you have a Cavs team coming off a 7-game series themselves. So neither team's really going to have an advantage as far as rest goes heading into game 1. And you got a Cavs team and Donovan Mitchell, James Harden, 2 guys who are some of the best in the league at creating their own shots and as well as scoring points. So they're going to have the ball in their hands all the time. They may be the most explosive backcourt in the league. And then you add to that, you got Evan Mobley, who's not only a great defensive player, but he can get you some points as well. And then you see the game that Jarrett Allen had yesterday at center for the Cavs. Honestly, he was their best player. So the Pistons are going to have a lot on their hands. But the good thing about them is they have a great defense. And of course, they're led by Cade Cunningham, who to me is the best point guard in the game. So they had some guys step up in Game 7, of course, against the Magic. They're going to need that to continue. They're going to need all hands on deck, especially on offense, against this explosive Cavs team. So for Detroit to win, I think they're going to need much more production now. Jalen Duren, their all-star center, is going to be a step up in competition, going from Wendell Carter Jr. to Jarrett Allen. So they're really going to need him to produce more than single-digit games scoring and rebounding as well. So they're going to need him to step it up, as well as obviously they're going to need to get Cade some help. Tobias Harris had a really good series against the Magic. But we're going to have to see how he does against Evan Mobley, who's one of the better defenders in the game, period, regardless of position. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be the matchup for them. And Evan Mobley on the other side for the Cavs is going to have to take advantage of that matchup against Tobias Harris. He's really going to have to step it up scoring-wise. If Donovan or James dip off in scoring, he's going to have to be the guy that steps up for Cleveland. That being said, sorry Cleveland fans, but I got the Pistons winning this series. I think this would be a 6-game series. I was tempted to go 7, but I'm going to roll with 6. I think Detroit's defense is going to be a big key to this series. I think they're going to have some games they either stifle Donovan or James, or if they do get their points, they're going to have to work really, really hard for it. And I don't know if the Cavs are going to have the players to be able to make up for the lack of shot making or scoring that those two would have on any given night, because Detroit has so many guys that they can throw at them on defense. I think their offense will be just enough to get them through, and I don't think the Pistons or the Cavs have an answer for Cade on defense. So I think those things will get the Pistons through, and I think they learned a lot from this last series against Orlando. They haven't been the favorites in such a long time in any series. They were in the playoffs last year, so they have some playoff experience, but they don't have experience being the favorites in the series. That's a whole different vibe. And so I think they learned a lot from that series. And it's going to translate to this series. And I think the Pistons beat the Cavs in 6 games. And that brings us to the next series. It is a big market showdown as you got the New York Knicks and the Philadelphia 76ers. Sixers are the 7 seed. The Knicks are the 3 seed. This, I believe, is the 10th all-time matchup in the postseason between the Sixers and the Knicks. They met a couple years ago in the first round, but before that, they hadn't met in decades. So, big matchup here. You got 2 teams that aren't incredibly deep as far as the bench goes. They may have a guy or 2 off the bench that contributes, but this was mostly going to be about the starting lineups. I mentioned in the last series, I think Philly had more top-end players in their starting rotation than Boston did, and I think that's what really helped get them through. Obviously, you can point to Jason Tatum not playing in Game 7, but the fact that the Sixers were able to come back from 3-1 with Tatum there for the most part, I think speaks to their depth in their starting lineup. I think the Knicks are going to be able to match that a lot better than Boston will be able to. So it's one of those things where styles make fights, matchups make playoff series. And I think that's what we'll see here with the Sixers and the Knicks. Now, obviously, New York is looking to build off of last year's Eastern Conference Finals appearance, the first since 2000. They're looking to make it back. Expectations around New York are finals or bust. And with Boston losing, I have to say they have as good of a shot as any in the East to make it out of there. So expectations will definitely raise. However, Philadelphia and their fans should feel really good about this series. I think they, rightfully so, have a really good shot to win it because I look at the matchups, and again, I don't see where there's a clear advantage for the Knicks. Just in the starting rotation with the guards, with the 2 forwards, the center matchup. Not really a true advantage there. And also, plus, it doesn't help that there's a little bit of beef between Embiid and Cat from the past when Cat was in Minnesota. You know, they had some scuffles and stuff. So expect for some of that to be surfaced as well if you haven't already seen on social media. So that always adds a little flavor, a little fun to any postseason matchup. And then, of course, you got the whole Philadelphia-New York rivalry. It's got all the makings of a classic series. And yes, I believe this series has 7 games written all over it. I think that's what we're going to get. But I do think the Knicks will eventually pull out Game 7 there in Madison Square Garden. Embiid and Cat could be, I think Embiid's the better player, but Joel has a build, he has kind of that tendency to have one of those clunker games where he settles for jump shots and threes and is not really taken to the basket, and he can be kind of inefficient, and that can really hurt his team. You look at the matchup, Tyrese Maxey and Jalen Brunson, for the most part, is a draw. So I think the real advantage that New York can really exploit is that 2-3-4 matchup, right? The shooting guard and the 2 forward spot. Edgecombe, the rookie, even though he's played very well, he played very well against Boston last series. And you got Paul George and Kelly Oubre Jr. versus the Knicks with Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Mikal Bridges. That can be that, and I think New York's bench is a tad bit deeper than Philadelphia's. It's not saying a whole lot, but I think it is deeper. So those couple of things, I think, can be just enough to pull New York through. But it's going to be a slog of a series, and I would not be surprised at all if it goes the other way. But for now, give me Knicks in 7. All right, guys, so now we switch gears to the Western Conference, and we break down the 2-6 matchup in the Western Conference semifinals, that being between the San Antonio Spurs and the Minnesota Timberwolves. I believe these 2 teams haven't played in the playoffs in about 25 years since Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett were there. So long time coming for this matchup. And it should be intriguing, especially with the news that we're starting to hear. Of course, as I said, Game 1's tonight. But we're hearing the news that Anthony Edwards possibly could be available to play. He's questionable to play in Game 1, so he's probably not going to play in this game. But of course, if you remember, he hyperextended his knee and had a bone bruise in his leg in the last series against Denver. I believe that was either Game 3 or Game 4 that he went out. And so he missed the last 2 games. Of course, Minnesota was able to pull it out. But even if he doesn't play tonight, he's probably coming back at some point in this series. So that could be an intriguing thing to watch. And that's going to be a huge boost for a Minnesota team that is going to need all hands on deck against this deep San Antonio roster. The biggest key in this series to me comes from Minnesota. Whenever Ant does come back, I think it's going to be key that Minnesota doesn't just throw him the ball and just watch him operate on the wing on offense. With so many wing players that the Spurs have that they can throw at Ant with De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper and then others, Devin Vassell, Kelvin Johnson. There's so many players that they can throw at Anthony Edwards, try to throw him off his game. So it's going to be more important that the Rudy Goberts, the Julius Randles, Jaden McDaniels took a huge step forward in this last series as an NBA player, showing his ability on offense as well as defense. They're going to need that in this series. I'll do some who don't know when he's coming back. They didn't really say, but they're going to need those performances he had against Denver. They're going to need something similar against the Spurs. Because this roster is so deep, so talented and young. But I do think Minnesota's going to provide a stiffer test than Portland did, because Portland is, just as inexperienced as San Antonio was. So once they got Wemby back, they just were rolling on all cylinders the Spurs were. So that's going to be key. And of course, the matchup with Rudy Gobert and Victor Wembanyama. Rudy Gobert did such a good job, about as good a job as you can do against Nikola Jokic in the last series. But Wemby, as we know, is just such a different player with his ball handling ability, his agility, his athleticism. It's going to provide a totally different challenge. So we'll see how Rudy Gobert rises to that occasion on defense. So as far as my series pick, I'm tempted to go San Antonio in 5, but I will give the Wolves an extra game, just out of respect for Anthony Edwards and out of respect for the veteran savvy and experience that they have, again, on this Minnesota team. This is the third year in a row they've won a playoff series, and they went to the Western Conference Finals the last 2 years. So they're not going to be chopped liver for the Spurs in any kind of way. It's not going to be a co-spine type of matchup. But I think the Spurs are too deep, too talented, and I love the system that they're in with the coach Mitch Johnson. It's very similar to what Greg Popovich ran. You can see that they buy into that system with all those guys that are able to score. So it's just going to be too much. I think it's going to overwhelm Minnesota, giving the San Antonio Spurs, making the Western Conference Finals, and they win the series in 6 games. And finally, the last series that we will cover is the 4-1 matchup in the Western Conference, featuring the 4 seed, my favorite team, the Los Angeles Lakers, going up against the number 1 seed and the defending champions, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Keys this series, hey, my Lakers, I was pleasantly surprised by my Lakers squad coming out and beating the Rockets in that series. I didn't predict it heading into that series, but I also didn't know that Kevin Durant was only going to play in 1 game, essentially. And of course, getting Austin Reeves for the last couple of games back, that certainly gave him a boost. But for the reports that we're hearing on Luka's conditioning concerning his hamstring, at the very best, we can hope that he can come back around game 4, maybe like game 5, in this series anyway, because he's been out, I believe, for about 4 or 5 weeks at this point. And of course, hamstrings are very, very tricky injuries to navigate around. It's definitely not something you want to rush back from soon. So I don't know if we can really expect to see Luka in this series. And that may make things even quicker than I think that they're already going to be. Because, listen, my Lakers, guys, just go out and have fun. It's been real. We had a really good ride in that first round. It's pleasant to see us still playing. But I can't lie to you. I think the road ends here. This Oklahoma City Thunder team, too well coached, too deep. They got the best player on the floor, and what I think is going to be the back-to-back MVP in SGA. Too young, too athletic. Got too many players to throw at you on offense and defense. They play dogged offense and defense on both sides of the ball. We'll have to see what the stats of Jalen Williams is, but I don't know how much it's going to matter in terms of whether the Thunder win this series or not. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. Now, this raises up an interesting point in that I saw a pretty quick post on Twitter X the other day, and it's pretty interesting stuff. Kobe Bryant, his last playoff series ever that he played in was against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Tim Duncan's last playoff series, last game ever in the NBA was against the Oklahoma City Thunder in the loss. Dirk Nowitzki's last playoff series was also against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Could we be raising the question that this could be the last series that we see LeBron in, the last NBA games that we see LeBron play? It's a fair question when you consider that there have been multiple inside sources reporting that LeBron has said he doesn't want a farewell tour. I saw a quote, I think it was last week, where LeBron's looking forward to retirement. He's not saying that he's going to retire after this year, but you never know. Again, he doesn't want the farewell tour. He said how much he's missed as far as family time with his wife and his daughter and his son. Obviously, his other son's playing in the league, of course, with him. His other son's away at Arizona, so he's lamenting those things a little bit more. It's his 23rd season. He's 41 years old. Reports have already circled around all year that this is probably going to be, even if he does come back, it's going to be his last year as a Laker, most likely as of right now. I could see him in the purple and gold next year, but then the question is going to be raised, how much better is this Laker team going to be? So these are all things that have got to be considered, because the Thunder, obviously, as we all know, are heavy favorites to win the series. The Lakers haven't beaten them in the regular season. And the way things are looking, it might be a challenge to win a game, certainly more than a game, off of this Oklahoma City Thunder team in the playoffs. So with that, I think where I'm headed with my prediction, that being I have the Oklahoma City Thunder winning. I think the Lakers can get a game. It's probably going to be in LA, most likely, because that Oklahoma City crowd and that atmosphere over there is too wild. I don't see the Lakers winning there in Oklahoma City. So it's going to have to be one of those games in LA. I think they can still win, and that's about it. All right, guys. So with that being said, those are my picks for the Western and Eastern Conference semifinal series. Again, I got the Pistons in 6. I got the Knicks in 7. I got the Thunder in 5, and the Spurs in 6. So those are my picks to make the Western and Eastern Conference Finals. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what your predictions are heading to the series. And make them quick, because these games start tonight. So the NBA, like I said, is not wasting time with these semifinal series. But with that being said, like, share, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching and for tuning in. You can be anywhere else in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. So until next time, y'all, Quinn Steve out.